Hello and welcome to the first of our Victoria University live series. We are live from VU's CBD campus in Melbourne, Australia. VU is ranked in the top 2% of universities worldwide, but what really stands out is VU's position as number one in Victoria for skill development, educational experience. And whether you're aiming to turn your passion for sport into a career, dive deep into specialised knowledge and research, or something else entirely, Victoria University will help you get there. Our special guest this afternoon is Paul Barnes, the Director of Support and Logistics at McLaren Racing. McLaren are the reigning Formula One Constructors Champions. Paul's role sees him responsible for the electronic system configuration of the race cars and all supporting infrastructure. Paul's also responsible for the human logistics required to successfully execute a Formula One season. No small job, as you can imagine. This includes selecting flights, hotels and associated travel considerations for the team. Paul, thank you so much. Welcome to Victoria University and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, it's nice to be here.
Let me start. We're sitting in the CBD of Melbourne, literally a 15-minute drive to the famous Albert Park circuit. You've been visiting that circuit in your role at McLaren for the last 20 years. How much work in your role goes into landing here as a race team? Can you talk us through the logistics to try and get your team as well placed to win this weekend?
Yeah, sure. So we sort of start planning. So when the calendar comes out for the following season, we'll just pick up the planning. So this planning for Melbourne and then onwards probably started May last year. So we bring, we have 58 operational people. We bring lots of other supporting staff. So I think at this race, we've got like 115, 120 people. So they all need a flight, a hotel, a transfer, a visa, so it's not a small undertaking. And, that's before we've even got started with any car stuff. But actually moving humans around sounds really simple, but you've got to take into account like the timings of the flights, when you can get the best rest, which airlines you take, which are the quickest routes, and all of that. You have to spend quite a lot of time planning that. It can't just be we'll sort of make it up as we go along. It is a massive operation.
Paul, after the Singapore Grand Prix last year, the two McLaren drivers, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, called you up onto the podium alongside Max Verstappen. You've been doing this for 20 years. To see you up there, I know you like to be behind the scenes. What was that moment like for you?
Incredible. I don't like being in the spotlight generally. That's not what I'm here for. It's not what I'm about. But to be able to represent this team that I've worked for, I've actually been at McLaren nearly 24 years because I worked in the road car division before. To represent them on the podium was incredible. It's like for me, my family, and actually some of my mates said, "Oh, you do actually work there then?" That was one of the first times they'd actually seen me. Would occasionally get a glance at me on the pit wall, but other than that, I'd like to stay in the background and keep quiet. But yeah, it's incredible, and it's quite difficult to sort of take it all in at the time. So you kind of just have to go with it, and then I just got drenched by Lando, which was great.
It was a great reflection on you that in that moment they're celebrating a highlight of their career, that they think of you and the work you do behind the scenes. That must mean something to it.
Yeah, it's great. And you didn't even know I was going up there either. It's decided by the team principal, Andrea. And so I was literally about to take my headset off and go to the podium and celebrate with the team. And he said, you're going to go up there and represent them. And then you're kind of like, oh my God. And then you're standing there thinking, don't fall over, don't mess it up, don't break the driver's teeth with the bottle, like all these things. So yeah, but it was incredible.
Paul, there's a huge amount of pressure in your world, and last year McLaren are fighting for their first Constructors' Championship in 26 years, and an intense amount of scrutiny. The dollars and the commercial outcomes are massive. I know you're passionate about what you would describe as a values-driven approach to leadership. Can you explain what that means and why that is something that's been vital to your success?
I think any leader, isn't a leader without their people. And I think the way that you treat people, even at the start of your career and all the way through, it's got to be, you've got to think about their well-being. You've got to think about, that essentially all of these people are sacrificing, it sounds like a wrong use of the word sacrificing, but they are sacrificing family time. If we can't create the environment for them where they can let that family time go, because we are providing the enjoyment and the sort of the well-being and the the physical training that we provide, but it's all about people. Like you can't execute a Formula One season if you haven't got the sort of right approach to your people. And I think that starts at any level. Kind of people in my team asking about their families. They're not just saying how's the family. You kind of have to start remembering like names and asking how their children are, and any the more I know about my people, if they're coming to me about personal things, then I know that the work stuff will just take care of itself because there's a trust piece there. But equally, if someone's having a hard time, then you would cut them a bit more slack at work and actually not pile the pressure and give them more work. And you sort of, everyone else steps up and takes that work off them so that they can concentrate on, resolving a family issue from Melbourne, for example, is not a 5-minute job. There's time zones, you can only do it on the phone. We're lucky now, we can have FaceTime calls, which when I first started doing Formula One, we didn't. So that does make a difference. But I think looking after your people is for me, the most important thing, because, if you don't look after them at a personal level, then you can't build the trust. And then you can't actually help them realise their potential. As everyone's born with potential. It's up to leaders and the people to make them sort of live that potential and actually achieve it, or go even further to what they think. And I think you can only do that if you connect at a sort of personal level with them.
And you can't fake that, can you? Either put the time in, you know people's names, or you don't, as you said, or you take genuine care. And from your experience, people know if you're dialing it in or not, don't they? Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like you said, you can't fake that, and the amount of work that has to go into it. I think as I sort of worked through the sort of leadership stages at McLaren, you kind of you almost, you can gauge like how you didn't like being treated, and sort of flip that over, and then you just realise how much work it is. It's a huge amount of work every day just to stay connected. In the mornings, like we'll go to the track tomorrow, and the first thing to do is go around and check in. Just go around and check in with the entire team. Any questions? We have a quick team meeting, but then people aren't going to raise things in front of everyone. So you do have to spend that time. And obviously then you get into sort of your engineering stuff, but for me, the people come first, and then everything else kind of follows onwards and looks after itself.
We're in this Drive to Survive Netflix era of Formula One. The race has never been more popular. The storytelling aspect of that blows me away. The female attendance at motorsport here in Melbourne is off the charts. I see it in my own home. My wife is suddenly obsessed with Formula One because you know the stories. Can you tell us about what that's been like? The people that you know so well have suddenly become household names, and the power of that storytelling, what it's done for your sport.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were talking just a minute ago, and even going back 4 or 5 years, you go to some races in the grandstands, they weren't full. And now it's like, actually when we had COVID was a real good sort of indicator about how popular Formula One had become, because it had to be televised. And, we were driving into the circuits. Some circuits, it would take us like 5-10 minutes to get in. And now we're trying to go to the same circuit and it's taking us an hour, and there's fans everywhere, and they're, especially for us last year, a massive year. And we've kind of really started building on our fan engagement and building that sort of fan base around McLaren, which, obviously one of the most historic teams. But actually to connect with your fans is really important. And I think we do that really well as a team. But I think Drive to Survive has been amazing for the sport. It gives you a bit of a look behind the scenes at what you don't normally see, I think. And especially in America. F1's getting huge now, and that was one of the ones they really wanted to crack. It's always been very popular in Melbourne, because obviously you've had lots of Australian drivers. But yeah, I think in general, it's really sort of ramped it up quite a lot.
Paul, we look at Formula One as outsiders and see its innovation and technology and resources thrown to try and be the best in your particular sport. Everyone in the world's obsessed with artificial intelligence at the moment. Have you seen that language already be played out in the Formula One world?
Not necessarily in my world, but I know that it's coming, and that there is a use for it. We use it for very basic things. For example, an itinerary to get a lot of people here. We use some AI to interrogate those, just to make sure that we've accounted for everybody against our sort of travel documents, because the worst thing is someone turns up at the airport and you've missed them out. I think it's going to be a problem for them. But I think that it's going to have a real world use in F1. You can use it for all sorts of our communications, our intercoms. There's some back end stuff that I think AI will be good. And then there's some people at McLaren that are way cleverer than me that will find a much better way of using it, I think.
Can you overlay a little bit more detail on, clearly planning travel and hotels and accommodations is a specialist area of yours, but how does that work for you? Are you using ChatGPT? Are you typing in your program and checking it, or can you give us a detailed example of that?
we spend a lot of time with one of our travel companies who we use. We generate a huge amount of documentation, which then feeds into what we call our race itinerary. So on the race itinerary, it's just a dumb PDF, but actually to read line by line is just not, it's not doable with the amount of time we have. You know, we have 28 events to plan for over a year. You know, the 2026 calendar will be out soon, so we'll be getting started on that. So you don't have the time to sort of search through and just make sure that everyone's got a flight, a hotel, a transfer. So you can type in my name and just say, right, show me what I've got, and it will just pull it all up for you. So it's very, very basic what we're using it for. I'm just leaving it to the data scientists to understand what they're going to do with it in the future.
Paul, we're sitting in a room with young people attending one of the great universities in the world, and everyone wants to live the best life they can. Most of us are searching for that passion. You've had 20 years in a sport that people love, and it clearly looks like you followed your passion. What advice do you give to young people starting out their journey? What would you pass on?
I think for me, if I go back to the beginning, I did a lot of things wrong. I was always thinking about the next step. You know, I was the guy that was going to the back of the Lego kit and trying to build it from there. And like, you just can't, physically can't do that. You can have a life plan, absolutely have a life plan. But, you know, one of my guys asked me the other day, and I said, it's like driving a car. So for me, you get in the car, you know where you need to go, and you know roughly how long it's going to take. But what you don't know is all the outside influences that are going to either make it quicker or slower. And you're going to have to make decisions on the way into, like I'm driving to MTC, there's loads of decisions to make. It's the same as your life. You know, you don't know what those decisions are yet, and you won't always make the right ones. But that's totally fine as long as you sit down and analyse what you can learn from that mistake. The worst thing to do is not learn from mistakes. And I was making the same mistake over and over again. I was thinking I was at the back of the Lego set, and I was, you know, not even on page 2, and that set me back in my career. It was only through intervention from my now boss Andrea, where, you know, helping me realise my potential was actually taking a couple of steps back and putting a plan together to actually be able to achieve that potential. I think a lot of people, we live in an impatient world, don't we? You know, if you want a new pair of trainers, you can put it on your credit card, but in the long term, you're going to pay more for that set of trainers, and you don't actually need it right now. It's the same in like your life. You know, don't jump to the goal. Plan like nicely how you're going to get there, and then just learn from everything that's put in front of you. I think that's probably the best advice I could give.
I'd like to come back to Andrea and ask you a question about someone stepping up in your life like that. I'll make a note of that. Paul, we're really proud to have you in what we call our leader community, where we curate groups of 5 to 6 leaders around the globe, and diverse groups, different backgrounds, that come together to learn and to connect and to collaborate. And you've been a great champion of that Aleda world. Could you share a bit about your group, some of the people that you meet with monthly in that forum, and the effect that it's had on you? Yeah,
I think when I spoke to Matt originally in Singapore a couple of years ago, we were like, oh, that sounds cool. But actually thinking like, I'd need to sort of think, what do I need to get out of it? And then obviously had a one-to-one call with Matt and said, I'm interested in these things. And the next thing, you turn up on this Teams meeting with these people. And then some of them I knew. So Carlos Cuesta at Arsenal. And we now get on well. We sort of text and share ideas and things. But he, like for me, he's in the group, he is like, if I wish I was like that at 29. Do you know what I mean? Like the way that he approaches his life is so good. You know, the way that he's philosophical about everything. He's so curious about learning. He's just an all-round nice guy. And so we've hit it off. We have very common interests. We've met up outside. He actually came to Monaco, and he was kind of blown away with the amount of detail that we go into. So he's kind of taking that back. And I know you've got Mikhail in another group. So then we've got Nick O'Kane. So another amazing guy. You know, what was he, the highest paid businessman in the?
I think at Macquarie Bank he might have held that title for a period of time. Yeah.
But, you know, again, you know, a guy to learn from, you know, similar to me, been at a company for 25 years and just decided that now I want to change. And he took a huge life decision, moved his entire family to Dubai, and now they've gone to Switzerland now, which is cool. So you can just learn, you know, one of the questions I asked him the other day was like, how did you make that decision? You know, like if I was ever thinking of moving on, I've been here so long, you know, institutionalized, you know. So how do you set about like making that decision? And you know, the way he explained it, like just break it down, you know, like what does it mean for your family? What does it mean for you professionally? And actually just gives you a nice fresh sort of outlook on just making big decisions in your life. So he's a really great guy. Reedy, so psychologist, he'd been working with some very difficult sort of sports around the world. Again, you know, he just brings a nice sort of calmness to the group. You know, he brings a new sort of angle from a human perspective. And actually, some of the challenges he's had around the world was some of the things that I can take into my role and deal with people that aren't difficult. But actually, you can still use that, you know, to deal with people. They're like some of his techniques and things are great. Justin Longmuir, love him. He just like blunt, but so good to have in the group, you know. Again, I think the nice thing about our group is that it bounces off. You know, we're all very different, but we're all the same. You know, we've all got a common sort of curiosity about learning and learning from each other. And I think Justin, I just like some of the way sometimes he just says it how it is. And actually, sometimes you need that. You can have a big long conversation about something, but you just need someone in the room that just says, actually, this is what we do. And then Matt said I'd leave her till last, but Umrah. She's incredible. So she sort of humbles all of us. You know, some of us are doing sport, some of us are doing like big things in business, and she's sort of doing this huge humanitarian like crusade around Africa, and she just kind of makes you go, okay, yeah, you win, you know. But she's an incredible lady, absolutely incredible. And I think the nice thing about our group is when we first met, like session 1. It's all about, I'm not really sure who's who, I'm not really sure what I'm going to say. And then like in session 2, we were sharing like proper, like really deep personal things to try and generate like the conversation in the group. And actually now we just can talk about anything. It's great.
Yeah, the Justin Longmuir is the coach of the Fremantle Dockers. Umrah Omar is the founder of an organisation called Safari Doctors, and literally changing the health outcomes of millions in Africa. And Dr. David Reed was the psychologist at the Chennai Super Kings and Essendon Football Club and others. And so it doesn't make sense to have, you know, someone from McLaren Logistics and Umrah Omar, Harvard educated, lives in Nigeria, changing the plan. We're a bit obsessed with the different thinking, and your brain works in a different way, but the logistics of your brain really helping something like a Safari Doctors program. Can you share a bit of that collaborative learning model and why it's of appeal to you?
I think for me, any leader who thinks they're finished is like the best leader in the world. It doesn't exist. There's always something you can learn and something you can take, and it can be from other people, and actually it can be also from your own people that you lead. You know, you go in every day and thinking, you know, there's an old saying, you know, we've got to learn one thing every day. Totally agree. You know, there's always a new approach, and actually in this group, you know, I can go in there with the sort of hurdle, and it just becomes like this web of chat, and it just goes into so many places. And I filled up like a back of my notebook, like for every session. And I was turning the page. I think we were in Abu Dhabi, and I turned the page of my notebook. I start a new notebook every year. Turn the page, and I was into a leader session. And I was like, I've run out of room. So you can take so much from these people, because ultimately everybody's done something different, and everybody's doing something different. So if I wasn't open enough to learn from, you know, what Umrah's doing or what Carlos is doing at Arsenal or Reedy or anyone, you know, that with me, I'm closed, and I'm thinking that I'm finished as a leader. You know, I'm the best leader in the world. It's not possible.
I love that curiosity that we see, and I'll ask you a bit more about that. Young 23-year-old in your world who grew up in the suburb of Brighton, about half an hour from where we're sitting here at Victoria University City Campus, Oscar Piastri. As someone who doesn't know your sport well, he looks like a pretty special talent and a very calm, collected young man. Tell us a bit about Oscar Piastri.
Mr. Unflappable. Yeah, I think you know, he's got a good grounding, good family. He's got Mark Webber as, you know, as his manager and sounding board. But start of the talent, as soon as he got in the car, everyone was like, yeah, he's pretty special. You know, to go toe to toe with Lando, and you know, and beat him on occasions as well.
Can you tell straight away when someone new gets in the car as long-term experts? Can you see the skill?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes like you might have a slow burner.
Yep.
But Oscar was straight up on the pace. And actually, you know, obviously, I think he did his first year. I might get this wrong, and Harry will tell me off, but I think he did his first year, and then immediately got a new contract. You know, so the investment that McLaren are making him, and the way he approaches his work, he's just so calm, so level-headed. You hear him in the car, and you think, how can he be going around at 200 mile an hour? I think I've only ever heard him sort of swear once. I think that was at the Miami GP. But he's a great driver and a really nice guy.
I've got to ask, what made him swear at the Miami GP?
I don't think I can say, can I, Harry? Can I or not?
Harry's.
I think he was questioning the steward's decisions. How about that?
We've all done that before at some stage. Paul. I love this opportunity, and it's a real privilege to sit alongside great leaders in their own right and your 20-year history. And we see this idea that we have that success leaves clues and these patterns of leadership. And I want to ask you about a few of them. This thought of self-leadership. For us, it's hard to lead someone else until you know yourself. So can I ask you this? What do you do to make yourself feel good so that you can show up effectively for others in your team?
Like I said before, the sort of being personable first. I think you, as a leader, you need to be approachable and like number one, just be authentic. Like like you said earlier, don't try and fake it, because people are smart and they will see through that. So I think the first thing is like connecting with my people. Even when I sort of, you know, I've just had one new guy starting one of my groups at the track. And I just sat down and said, you know, like, you can share whatever you want with me. It's up to you. But, you know, I like to know about, you know, your family setup. I like to know about, you know, if you've got any struggles, you know, things like that, because they sort of sit there and they think, I'm not going to share this with this guy. But actually, when they do, it just makes me be able to help them more. So I think that for me is point number one. I think that is point number one. And then after that, you kind of, like I said earlier, people are born with potential. Now, I've had leaders that have allowed me to realise that potential. So now it's my turn to like get people to understand how much potential they have. You know, one of my leaders, you know, if you'd taken him 2 years ago, you probably would have said, I'm not sure he can be a leader, but you have to make them believe that they can do it and guide them in the way that like I was guided, for example, but also use my examples of where I went wrong. And I'm very honest at work. You know, I did make a lot of sort of mistakes. You know, when I first started in Formula One, I was young and it was an enjoyable time. But I managed to pull myself away from that and sort of start focusing on, you know, I genuinely didn't know that I wanted to be like a leader. Like I said earlier, I didn't have that plan. I got that plan in my head too late. So I'm trying to help people who are essentially like, they're all younger than me. They're the future of the team. If we don't set them up right, we're setting them up to fail. And that's not fair on them. And it doesn't reflect well sort of on the team either. So actually investing that time with them. And it can be, you know, it can be one-to-one sessions, which we do a lot of. But it can be, you can pick something up, and like tomorrow morning, I could pick something up in a like 5-minute conversation, and it's an area to work on, or it's an area where they need support. But it's just understanding your people. And for me, that like fills my cup, if you like, you know, just seeing someone sort of rising to the top and making that step, and actually and building their confidence to make that step, and then you support them, you know, and they're going to make mistakes. But this is what I said earlier. It's about like learning from those. Because if you don't learn, then you're never going to be, or if you don't accept, you know, we talk a lot about humility as well. When you've made a mistake, just say, I'm sorry, you know, I'll review that and work out, you know, owning your mistakes, which is another thing that we work on, or I work on quite a lot with my teams. But ultimately, if they make a mistake, that mistake is not because they've got up that morning and gone, quite fancy doing a bad job today. It's because I've given them the opportunity to make the mistake. So I own it for them and with them. You know, ultimately it might be a decision they've made which is outside of our sort of working parameters, if you like. But I actually like applaud that, because they're showing confidence to make a decision that we haven't discussed. Now, if it goes wrong, then that's a new conversation, but it's not ever got a negative spin on it. So I think, you know, they're the main things for me. And, you know, we wouldn't have achieved what we achieved in the last probably 18 months to 2 years. You know, it's been quite a meteoric rise, you know, in performance. And that's not just because we've got a quick car. It's because we are investing that time in our people, and they are sort of receiving that and acting on it. And I think that for me is probably the main thing that I enjoy about being a leader, is when that, you know, when someone steps up and they absolutely nail it, and you think, all the things that we've spoken about, you're doing them now in real life.
Yeah, what a great answer, and there's so much in that, owning your own mistakes and allowing people the freedom to feel comfortable to make a mistake at the same time, and being part of that with them is full of wisdom. Is there a piece of leadership advice that you pass on more than any other, Paul?
Be authentic. For me, it's the number one.
Yeah.
You know, I've had leaders which they are good leaders in their sort of technical right, but connecting with them on a personal level to do that next step has been a challenge. But equally, you know, I've had leaders most recently as well, and sort of the guy that I reported to before Andreas, a guy called Stephen Watt at the factory, he sort of realised that I was kind of at the ceiling of where he could take me, and it didn't make any sort of team sense to move me, like from a team structure point of view, into sort of Andrea's world. But he sort of identified that I had potential, so he sort of helped me. And then, of course, then you go to Andrea, who's a completely different beast. Honestly, I've never worked with anyone so great.
Well, I've got to ask you about him now. I said we'd come back to that. What makes him the great leader for you?
Again, authenticity. He really cares about people, and he spends time. You know, he essentially rescued my career for me. You know, like, and it wasn't like a nice conversation to have with somebody, but it was an essential one to have to fix the problem. Again, I was all the things. I wasn't planning. I was impatient. I thought I was ready to move, but I wasn't. You know, and having someone to sit down and have the sort of honest conversation with you, to refocus, like where do you think you can get to? You know, nobody knows their ceiling, do they? You know, like, it's impossible. I can't say where I'm going to be in 15 years' time, because I know how I'm going to apply myself, but I don't know where that's going to take me. But he sort of sits down with you, and it's not only sort of like professional guidance as well. You know, we talk a lot about sort of, you know, family life, and, you know, he's an Italian, so big into their family life, and he really cares about when people are sort of having problems, or like he wants to know, like, oh, we've had to send someone home because someone's poorly at home. He wants to know. He wants to send that person an email or give them a call. You know, for me, they're the sort of the basic things that you can buy into immediately, and then the rest of it, you just get the incredible human that he is. You know, you see him sort of the way that he talks in the press. He's very measured, generally right. But we get that on a daily basis. You know, it's not like he lets us go off and run the team. He wants to know. Like, he doesn't micromanage. He completely stands off from the sort of day to day, but he just wants to keep in touch. You know, everything okay, all good, everything okay. You know, Alex okay, my wife, and Josh and Felix. You know, and he asks these things, and you just go into the day and you just think, you know, this guy's great because he genuinely cares. And he's got more people to sort of get around than I have. You know, I think my team's like 35, 40 people, and he's got like upwards of 1,000 to sort of connect with, and 9 times out of 10 he's traveling. So then he goes back to the factory and he spends like hours walking the floor and chatting to people and seeing how they're getting on, you know, and those types of people I really look up to, you know, because that's what I aspire to be. And, you know, I'm not there yet, if I'm honest, because I think he sets the bar so high in that like human touch element that I think it's really quite a challenge to meet it.
You can hear that in your voice, the impact that, you know, he's had on your life, and as you said, a life-changing experience. The idea of vision is something we talk about a lot, and setting the vision is one thing, but getting your team to be on board with your vision. McLaren's got a pretty clear vision in your world. How do you go about that?
Collaboration. I think again, it's for me, it should never just be my idea, because, you know, McLaren has existed as a team for longer than I've been on the planet. So what right would I have to say this is what we're doing? Obviously, I ultimately own the vision and the plan, but I always engage with my leaders and say, look, I'm thinking of doing this. You know, I've got a restructure coming up potentially in one of my teams, and I'm engaging with the leader, saying, like, if I just thrust a structure on you, you could look at it and go, well, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that, and already they're not buying in. So actually what I do is I always sit down and get them to help me plan the vision, because that's buy-in immediately. If they've had a say in it, it's not just me thrusting it upon them and saying, here you go, this is what we're going to do. So you need to sit with your people, and it's the same when you do anything at home. If I'm doing something with my wife, if I just do something off my own back, I'm dead meat. So you can sort of use that example and analogy to put into your sort of work life. Always engage with people, and don't be, dictators don't get far in life anymore, because it's just not the efficient way of leading. And I think engaging your people in that process, and that also, I like my people to be better than me, because ultimately your people make you look good because you've prepared them well. If they've got a better idea than me, then it goes in, because why would I take someone else's idea and say, oh, actually, I don't agree with that because it doesn't fit with mine? It could be better than mine. So you sit with them and you work it out that way.
We all are born different. As we grow, the experiences we have develop into outlooks uniquely our own, charting our life's course. No one sees an idea, opinion, or opportunity like you. And no one sees you like VU. Victoria University. Uniquely you.
At Aleda, our signature program, Aleda Connect, is something we're really passionate and proud of. We bring together groups of 5 to 6 people around the globe from diverse backgrounds, sport, industry, social venture and the arts, who come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
The Aleda Connect experience for me has been transformational. I met people that I would never have met from totally different spheres. It's very basic. It's all about relationships. It's all about how we communicate. And what the Aleda Connect group does that is so powerful is when you bring 2 people from 2 totally different worlds together, there's no ego. It just leaves room for the real you. And I think that's what Aleda gave me, was bringing back the real me and really connecting to my own leadership style.
Well, we love this saying, the cost of leadership is time, and you can't fake time either. You're on the road a lot, balancing out your life of a father of 2 and with your partner as well. How do you make that work?
It's hard. And it's actually getting harder. When the kids were younger, you have the phase where they're babies, and that was tough. We had Josh, and I went away a week and a half, 2 weeks later. I regret doing that now. I should have been better than that, I think. Alex my wife doesn't hold it against me, but I think that was a poor decision. It was our first baby, and I just wanted to get back on the road and carry on doing F1. That was quite a selfish decision. So when Felix came along, I took a year out to help back at home, because I felt like I didn't do that the first time, and I would have been hypocritical to do it again. And then they sort of go to school, and then it's kind of school pickups. But now it's a whole new ball game. Josh is off playing rugby while Felix wants to go go-karting, and Alex has got to run one to here and then ring someone to pick him up. And if you talk about good leaders, it came up in our session a few months ago. I think it was Imra said, who leads a leader? And my first answer was my family, because they are the ones that can criticise without sort of any repercussions. They can be brutally honest. She'll tell me when I'm being a rubbish husband or a bad dad. And that's good. I need that person to or she'll just take my work phone off me and hide it from me. Say just take a day off, And I think it's getting harder to leave that now. We just had the Christmas time, which was really nice to be at home. And then the other day I had to drop Josh off at rugby. I've been going to watch him play, drop him off and go to the airport, and yeah, it does get quite hard. But I think we've got a system, a family system. They get it. Felix got a phone for Christmas, so now we're all in the family WhatsApp group, which makes it a bit easier because he doesn't really like chatting on the phone. But unfortunately, this kind of comes with the territory in F1. It is partly sacrifice and your commitment, but you've got to work out how you balance that. I can't just go back after, we go to China after here. I can't just have the Chinese GP go back work Monday to Friday or Tuesday to Friday and then have 2 days off and then go away again. I need to like finish early a couple of days because we'll have dinner together at home, or I take Fridays off now before each event so that we can, you know, even if it's like Alex can go to a fitness class and I'll do the school run and pick them up in the evening, you know, it's just things that she doesn't have to do. And I think it's quite a challenge to balance that now as they're getting older.
We'll ask you about communication. It's a huge part of your world. You've got Harry from the communication team here today. Do you have a mantra when it comes to how you communicate?
I think communication and collaboration, they're kind of hand in hand. So if I talk in like race situation, so we have an intercom which is there's probably 45 people at the track on that intercom with various channels, and you know, like you need to sort of, you can't see these people. So your communication has to be clear, has to be concise, you know, and I think if you then take that out of the race situation and put it into a normal conversation, why would you be any different? Like I could say something to someone, if it's not clear and it's not like properly targeted at what we're trying to achieve, then it's open to interpretation. So I always try and be clear, honest, concise, because that's how you have to be if I'm talking to someone and I can't see them. You know, and again, you know, communication and collaboration, you know, when people say to me, oh, I've sent you an email, that to me is not collaboration. You know, you could put together an amazing email, and this is something else that I would advise as well. You could put together an incredible email, but it's going to take you 15, 20 minutes, maybe longer to get it really nice. Then you're going to send it. Someone else has got to read that, absorb it, and reply. So if you just had a 10-minute conversation, how many words can you say in 10 minutes? And how many ideas can you bounce? Versus what can you type, wait for someone to reply? Because email's not instant messaging. You know, someone's going to sit down and they're going to take time out of their day being less productive because they're reading your huge email. You know, like big wordy emails, I don't like them. You know, I'd rather just get up and go and talk to the people. You can follow up with an email and summarize it. That's fine. But I think the communication in the sort of modern world is just really lazy. You know, it's just really easy just to fire off a text or, you know, or an email. But actually that's not collaboration, getting up and talking to people and actually listening, not just speaking, I think is really important.
Yeah, brilliant answer. Two final questions for me, and we're going to open it up to our audience here at Victoria University for some questions, which would be great. Who's been the greatest leader in your life, Paul?
Other than my wife, I think I have to put her first. So normally you'd say like your dad or something, wouldn't you? But I'm not going to say that. And I'm not going to say it because he's going to see it, but I think Andrea. I think if it wasn't for him re-pointing me the right way, I wouldn't be sat in this chair now, for a start. I wouldn't have connected with all these incredible people. I wouldn't be sitting on a world championship. I don't know what I'd have been doing, but I was spiraling into this, like, the world owes me a living type, you know, scenario. So I think for Andrea picking me up from that situation and giving me the support, you know, like he put me in contact with a guy called Dr. Phil Hopley, and I did like 10 or 12 sort of personal development sessions with a psychologist, and you know, I did what they called the psychological assessment, the psychometric test. I did one of those, and you know, loads of benign questions, and you sort of like, a dog's waiting to cross the road and it's with a cat, which one do you help? And I'm like, this has got no relevance. And then you read this report about yourself and you're like, oh my God. And I showed it to Alex and she was like, yeah, that's you. You know, and I think Andrea pointed me that way and really honestly changed my life, because I think I would have wasted it.
And I love asking that question because it is, you know, important that people hear that, people that have an impact like that. For that exact reason, we're obsessed with this idea of collaboration, and you're a great champion of it. It's a great diverse group. And is there, in any of your interests, any of your passions, if you thought, God, I'd love to collaborate with one particular person, is there a name that you could search for?
I mean, passion-wise, like obviously, like F1. F1 runs my life. If I wasn't passionate about it, I wouldn't let it run it. That's a difficult question, if I'm honest. I think people like, from what I know now, you know, like people like Carlos at Arsenal, and I was lucky enough to go up there and watch a game, and then I met Mikel. You know, the way that those guys talk and the way that they, you know, it's all so aligned with how I feel and the sort of people that I'd want to work with, you know. And they're a really good example, actually. They're having a bit of a tough time in the Premier League at the moment. And, you know,
This is Arsenal and Mikel Arteta, the coach of Arsenal, that
yeah,
you're talking about, yeah.
And, you know, I was talking about an impatient world, you know, like as a leader, Mikel Arteta, I mean, I'm obviously not in this group, but I can see it through Carlos. Like, they've got a plan and they're sticking to that plan. And, you know, like the analogy about driving your car, things are happening to them which they can't control. Yet people who don't sit down and, football fans are fickle in the UK, and they don't sit down and understand that there is a grander plan. You know, all these people shouting Arteta out, you know, okay, well, what's the better option then? Someone that's going to come in and they might not have a plan. So those types of people who plan and, you know, and the way that they communicate, you can see, I don't know if you've watched the All or Nothing on, you know, you can tell that's authentic. You know, there's a really great thing where he wired up a light bulb in the changing room, you know, and those types of people I massively admire, because they're under huge pressure, but they're just sticking to their plan. And, you know, they don't hang anyone out to dry in the media. They own it and they move on, you know, and they're the types of people I would collaborate with and enjoy working with.
Paul, it's been a great pleasure to spend some time. We're days out from the first race of the Grand Prix, and for you to generously donate your time has been great. Thanks again to the team at Victoria University, to our great friends Jason Nicholas and his team at Temper for their support as well. I'd like to open up the conversation. If you have a question, please put your hand up. We've got some roaming mics, access to Paul Barnes and his wisdom. Please, who's brave enough to go first?
Hi, Paul and Luke. I'm from Victoria University. How do you approach having a bad day as a leader? Because sometimes I feel like when you are one, you feel like you can't have one.
That's a good question. And yeah, you're right. Like, you can't, like, if I'm what I class as a bad day, this is about perspective as well. You know, what you think is a bad day, if you look at everything else that's going on around you, you know, not necessarily on your day to day, you know, it's not that bad. You know, there's always going to be a solution. Now, the difficulty with when you're leading people is not showing that to them, because then you're like affecting their day as well. What I tend to do is if something's what I perceive as a bad thing, if it's not what millions of people are watching, but something's gone wrong because of a decision I made, probably not going to hide that one. But if it's something that I feel is bad, I write it down in my notebook, and then that becomes like probably that day, or if not the next morning when I've had some time to think about it. Like, I never make a rash decision on a mistake. I always sort of sit down and analyse, like, okay, so the mistake happened. It's not about the mistake, it's how you got there. So understanding like how you can break that down and understand actually the initial problem started here, and it might be on action 1, 2 or 3 before the actual mistake. But I like to break it down, and then after that will be a process to like, how do we stop that from happening again? Or I don't want to have a bad day again, so how do I stop that? And I think the best way to do that is to be analytical of yourself, but be analytical of the problem, and they come kind of hand in hand, really. But also be, you know, we talked about earlier about humility. I think having that, owning your mistakes, I think actually makes you feel better, which sounds a bit weird to say, but it just means that someone else potentially in your team or one of your colleagues isn't feeling the pain of a problem, which actually, isn't that bad. Does that answer your question?
It's a great question, isn't it? We often celebrate incredible stories like Paul's, but everyone has a challenging day. Got some time for a further question. Thank you for that one. Wade Noonan, Vice-Chancellor at Victoria University. Good to see you, Wade.
Oh, thanks, Luke. You've just promoted me too. I'm Deputy Vice-Chancellor, so hopefully my boss Adam won't be listening. Thanks, Paul. I'm interested in the issue of longevity. You've been doing what you've been doing for a long time. I'm interested in how you keep yourself fresh from year to year.
I think just, we touched on it earlier, like if I was doing the same job that I started doing when I started doing Formula One, I wouldn't be sat here now. I think it's being open enough and curious enough to learn something new. You know, like I said, no one in the world will ever get to 100% of the best leader ever, because there's always something new, and again, one of the reasons I'm sitting here is because I was kind of thinking, I don't know, where am I going to get this next? I get a great sort of leadership and mentorship from Andrea, but that wasn't enough. So it was by chance that we got sort of connected with the leader. And then for me, my brain's just like, well, this is great, because now I can connect with people that don't actually necessarily know my story and they don't know my role, but what they do know is leadership. So I like to be freshened up every year by learning more. And, it sounds like, well, it seemed like Formula One seems monotonous in what we do. We briefly talked about it earlier. You set up all the stuff in Melbourne, you do the race, you go through your race process, then you pack it all up and then you take it to China and you set it all up again. And it kind of becomes repetitive, but there's always something in the little bits of detail that allow you to like maybe do it better next time, or come up with a new idea, like actually, how can we do this better? Because this takes us ages, and those things like keep me sort of motivated, if you like. And also I think, like I said earlier, it's getting harder to do it now because of the sort of the time sacrifice at home. But part of me sees like what I'm doing here and what that generates for my family, and sort of, like my kids at school are the cool kids where they can you get me a signed Lando Norris hat, but they're material things, but I know that they're kind of making my kids feel good, and they're now like generally interested in it. So I think it's just you kind of have to have the right mindset, because you can get bored in Formula One, and people do, and they move on. But and I think obviously it helps now that we're sort of winning, but that freshens you up anyway, because it's been such a journey from winning. I joined the race team in 2005, and we just turned up expecting to win. We won the championship with Lewis in 2008, but then that was it. We went, Honda days, but you have to stay motivated even in the down days, because that's when you're really going to sort of earn your money, because dragging people sort of up, when we're turning up and we're 3 laps down at the end of the race, it's really hard to motivate people, but that motivates me to motivate them. So that's how I kind of stay fresh, if you like.
Paul's okay. I'd love to take another question or two. Yes, please.
Hi, it's Simone from Victoria University. With International Women's Day just the other day, I'm just curious to know what, for yourself as a leader and for McLaren, what they're doing to actually help empower women.
It's a good question. So we have quite a lot of initiatives back at MTC. Like we have a good sort of percentage of females on the team. I think 2 years ago, we had the first female mechanic in the pit lane, Melanie. And I think that one of my teams is like all female. That's my travel team. And I think that when I took over the travel team, they didn't have any exposure to the track. Like, it blew my mind that they'd never been. And putting these people into the spotlight, I think, is really, really important. So now they come to like 2 or 3 events a year each, and it's not about just getting them on a plane and giving them a holiday. This is about like demonstrating how McLaren sort of value every single employee, and actually, wrongly, the ladies, they sort of generally in the background unless they're doing a specific task, and actually putting them in the spotlight. We went to Bahrain last week testing, and Lauren, one of the girls in the travel team, came out, but we got her doing sort of some marketing and commercial bits, because then that's out there forever, and it's like it's helping to promote them. And obviously we celebrate all of the correct things like International Women's Day and things like that. And then we have a lot of our sort of STEM ambassadors. They're the female population of the workforce as well. So, it's a really important subject, and I think one that, I think you'd see like Haas as well. I've just got the first female race engineer. That's a great thing, because that's setting the bar for everybody else. That's a high profile job in a race team. Why can't everybody do it? And I think we're massively supportive of that. And yeah, we like to make sure that we have the right approach to that. And I think we do, and we're getting there. There's always room for improvement, of course, but I think we're taking the right steps.
Thanks, Simone, for your question. We might just squeeze one more in. I understand we get it pulled back to work. Is there a final question before we wrap up? Dr. Michael Hewitt-Gleeson is in the audience. Michael, a legend of our Aleda space. Fire away.
Thanks, Luke. And it's so great to hear everything about what you're doing in Melbourne. The Netflix series has really made a big impact. Certainly had an impact on me, my knowledge, and increased my interest. I remember years back when MTV started, and they were making videos of the songs, and then the MTV became the tail that wagged the dog of the whole music industry. And even in other sports since then, when they've become televised over a few years, it's actually changed the way the sport operates, and in some cases, the tail that wags the dog. What do you see could be happening in a positive way with your sport as a result of the Netflix series, maybe in the next 5 years, in the effect that it has on the operation of the sport?
It's a good question. I think from my perspective, I think generating, or actually not generating, re-engaging fans with Formula One is really important. I think it got to a stage where it was really exciting, and then they do a rule change and someone will come in and just dominate for a bit. But actually, you start to lose sort of touch with the fans, and I think the fans are ultimately like everybody. They contribute to paying your wages. They are the people that turn up and watch what you're doing, and when you wear the colours, you're not just wearing them for the team, you wear them for everybody. And I think the Drive to Survive series has really re-engaged those fans. And I think that I don't know if you watch the Drive to Survive, but you from our perspective, from being in it, you watch it and you kind of like, I don't remember it happening like that. But actually, the most important thing is the access to that content, which is being given to millions and millions of people, not just the sort of 2,000 people that work in the paddock. And I think without that insight, Formula One, just you turn it on Sunday, you've got no context. And then you turn it off again when someone wins the race. But I think some of the things that they cover, and I think some of the things from our side where, the drivers, some are more open than others, but when they're sharing, for example, Lando's quite open about some stuff on Netflix. But that's a really good thing to see, because you just think like young children are watching this and they then realise that it's okay to speak about things that aren't actually going that great. So I think there's a lot that people can take from it, and especially I can say to my children when they watch things like that, I'm like, just it's not about just watching something on the telly. Like, listen to what they're saying. They're saying they're having a rough time, yet your perception of them is they're a multi-millionaire racing driver and they've got the best life ever. But actually, they're just humans, and I think the human element is what Netflix is re-delivering back into F1.
Great note to finish on. Can you please put your hands together and thank Paul Barnes from McLaren. Great to see you, Paul. Thanks for joining us.